Thank you very much. It's a very pleasure to be here. Thanks again for the invitation. I will talk about socio-technical promises, but I will speak more about scientific promises than technical or technological promises. First, because I think that is less present in the literature. There is a huge literature on technological promises, but there is more ignored than the scientific promises, except in the talk by Miguel this morning. But well, this is the first point. The second point, I will talk about Chagas disease. In 2 words, Chagas disease, well, there's a lot of Latin American people, I think they know what is it, but for the rest of the world, it is not clear. So Chagas disease is just a Latin American disease called a tropical disease caused by a parasite called T. cruzi or Trypanosome cruzi. And I was working on Chagas disease for more than 20 or 25 years, even if I'm not interested at all in Chagas disease. But why? Because I discovered later that it could be a good model for me, for the sociology, for the history of science. And so I'm not really interested in Chagas disease, but in all we can say about this Latin American problem and the research that has been developed over more than 1 century on Chagas disease. So, can you read? This is a letter from Dr. Carlos Chagas, who was the inventor of the disease in 1909, so more than a century before, and to Dr. Salvador Massa, who was the competitor but also a friend. You know, between Brazil and Argentina there was always some kind of rivalry, and this is a very revealing letter, wrote in 1928. And Chagas says, there is a nefarious destiny in the study of trypanosomiasis. Every work, every study points a finger toward a malnourished population living in bad conditions. It points to an economic and social problem which humiliate governments because it is a testimony of their inability to solve a tremendous problem. It is not, like malaria, a problem of bugs in the nature, a mosquito linked to the environment, or like schistosomiasis related to an almost inalterable ecological factor. It is a problem of vinchucas, this is the insect who transmits the disease, who invade poor and dirty houses with ignorant inhabitants, poorly nourished, with without hope or social horizon, and who refuse to collaborate. Talk about this disease and you will have governments against you. So this is what I call the first way of thematizing the disease. So what we can see there is once the problem is constructed as a social one, the first promise says, if you change living conditions of poor people, you will solve the problem. And what is the kind of knowledge that is underlying this kind of a statement is that there are some kind of knowledge supporting this was the practical knowledge by, the doctors who work in the field, who are interacting with ill people in the rural houses, with the rural houses or rural environment. I didn't say before, but Chagas disease is not a urban disease, it's just rural. if you are if you are in Edinburgh, the probability to have Chagas disease is 0. But however, you have several Latin American students that could have in their suitcases some bags. But apart this less probable fact, so 80 years later, we find that, I don't know, okay, there's a mistake. This is a paper published in Science journal. This is what I call the modern promise. The complete sequence, the complete genome sequence of the trypanosoma cruzi, and published, but you can see the number of signatures. There are more than 80 authors there, because it's a large consortium working on the sequence of trypanosoma cruzi. And what is important here is the beginning of the paper and the end of the paper. The beginning is explaining to everybody what Chagas disease is. So you can see, I know, can you read it? I can't. Trypanosoma cruzi causes Chagas disease in humans. Acute infection can be lethal, but the disease usually more blah, blah, blah. So this is an alert signal to everybody that we are here facing a very important problem. So we can continue. This is, I transcript the paper. So I will continue. And this is the end of the paper. And the last section says, implication for novel therapies. And they say, DNA replication, blah, 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 and analysis of the tri-trip genomes parasite to provide novel drugs targets. And the elucidation of the complete repertoire of active T. cruzi should crucially help in this task. So, what are they saying? And here you have the same text. So, what are you saying in this new kind of constructing the promise? Are they saying it is not a problem of poverty as you were thinking during decades, and if it is, we cannot solve it, or it is not worth to try. Instead, it is a problem of genes. It is a problem of molecular biology. And there is a new approach to understand the life. And because molecular biology came, I will tell that in 5 minutes, but molecular biology came into scene in the 70s in Latin America, or even before in the end of the 50s, but the first object that the first molecular biologists took as an object, as a research object in Latin America was T. cruzi. And we'll discuss maybe later why. So, but here we are in the end of 20th century, and there's a new approach to understand the life, the whole genome of an organism. It is superior of the previous attempts focused on simple genes or proteins. So the promise is saying, wait, we're not in the traditional research, we are in the vague, we are in the new, we are in the borderline of the modern research. Since we have a complete understanding of this organism, we are able to provide new solutions, genetic sites to attack the parasite and to kill it. And this is the legitimate way to do it. We are in the modern boundaries of science. Then traditional, I already said this, and we have a large international network funded by prestigious agencies that trust in our skills. And finally, and maybe the most important, we can produce new drugs to treat sick people. Therefore, trust us, because we have the solution. So, just 4 quick points of a paper from Pierre-Benoit Joly on the structure of techno-scientific promise. He says the 4 ingredients of the promises. The first one is that it's linked with a given problem which has to be solved. The more urgent and widely acknowledged the problem, the more attractive the promise, and the more legitimate the action taken. Second point is credibility. Maybe I will not talk once again about credibility who have been talking for more than 1 hour and a half. So, but he's linking the credibility to the network built up by the actors. The third ingredient is have to fight against and exclude other possible or plausible solutions to solve the problem, and promises appear as the key element of the future-oriented communication. I have not to say more than this, and the proponents have to show not only the arrival point, but also credible ways to achieve it. However, I would like to add 2 other crucial dimensions to complete Joly's proposal that maybe he has forgotten or not think about. The first one is the relationship between disciplines and the building of social cognitive problems. And the second one, maybe Joly didn't think about because he was in France, but the dynamics of this process in a peripheral context. So, talking about disciplines, I don't know why, or maybe I have some hypothesis about it, but from I don't know, 3 or maybe 3 or 4 decades on, disciplines came an not very sexy object for STS. Maybe I have not the time today to discuss it, but it's like if disciplines had an old smell and something too ancient to be concentrated on, instead of thinking on networks or other kinds of organization. So of course, there are some exceptions. There's a very interesting book on disciplines published by the Sociology of Science yearbook 4 or 5 years ago. There are several scholars that still work on the dynamics of the discipline, but the paradox is disciplines are changing very quickly, and the disciplines we are dealing today had nothing to do with the disciplines we were facing, I don't know, in the end of the World War II. We are facing, I don't know, nanoscience, neuroscience, the new kind of environmental sciences that didn't, or the sea sciences that didn't exist 50 years ago. So we have to think about disciplines as well as cognitive, epistemological, social, and power spaces, and also political spaces. And my approach here is both epistemological and political. So this is the first point. The second is that the power of scientific fields do play an important role in building problems in public arena. So I have 2 examples. The addictions. If you take the fighting among disciplines to impose the legitimate way to conceive what an addiction is and what is very important, because this will fix the limits where the state can intervene. So if you think that an addiction is an individual problem thought by the psychological approach, so the state has to encourage health services and so on. But if you think that the addiction is linked to a neuroreceptor in your brain, so then you have encouraged research on neurosciences and nothing to do with the individuals and so on. If you think from a sociological point of view, you have to work in poor people or marginal people which are more likely to be close to consuming drugs or whatever. So we can say the same for climate change communities fighting from a disciplinary organization, etc. So I think the third point is also clear. So in our case, molecular biology, may I have water? Excuse me. Okay, thank you. So, molecular biology in the 70s succeed in taking G. cruza as a key object in both in Brazil and Argentina, excluding other traditional fields in the building of Chagas as a public problem. The first specialists who work with the Chagas disease were cardiologists, because the main manifestation of this illness is some manifestation called cardiopathy, so an obstruction of the right part of a heart. Epidemiology, entomology, biochemistry, they were all old sciences, old disciplines, and molecular biology was the real core of the research. Since then, public policies changed their focus. Instead of supporting permanent spraying of rural houses, which is the easier way to fight to this disease, if you kill the insects, there's no more transmission, systematic spraying, developing diagnosis method or estimating the infection rates, effort has been oriented to develop new drugs via molecular biology. I can tell you right now that at the end of the story, we have no new drugs after 50 or 60 years of research. We have no new drug, no new treatment, no new diagnosis method, etc. I'm sorry, this is spoiling the end of the story, but we are sociologists and historians and not filmmakers. So the second point is important for me, because until the previous slide, we could be anywhere. But now we are moving to a peripheral context. I will not discuss peripheral, what does peripheral mean, or the north on the south, maybe tomorrow. we have another session for this topic, but we can work with an intuitive sense of what centers and peripheries mean. So the first point is that local research agendas are usually built up following international mainstream lines. There's not a real autonomy to establish research agendas. I was talking with the Latin American students right now, and this was one of the points we were discussing on, is try to find your agenda when we are going to come back to your countries. But this may have a mean for social sciences, but it is quite different in hard sciences, especially in biology, biotechnology, physics, etc. So, elite scientists in peripheral contexts are really integrated into international networks where they have a relatively marginal position to orient or impose research lines. I cannot go further, but we analyzed the participation of Latin American research groups in the 5th, 6th, and 7th frame program from the European Union, and we have. I can say that it is true. Believe me. We could interview more than 900 Latin American research leaders and more than 30 European leaders to ask how the topics are set up with a large consortia, or who decide about methods, or who decide about industrializing knowledge if there is this possibility as a result of the project. And I can say that usually they were European leaders who took this kind of decisions. The third point is what I had just said. The capabilities to industrialize scientific knowledge are in these countries traditionally weak. So if the result of the scientific cooperation, this will not be industrialized in a peripheral context. And the last point is, as a consequence, when they take part of international research networks, they contribute to industrialize knowledge in hegemonic context. What we call cognitive exploitation. In a paper you can read. Okay, in our case, the T-Cruci Genome project, developed in parallel with the Human Genome Project, was led by groups located in Uppsala, Sweden, and Seattle, USA. So, the first question we have to pose is, why Swedish and American people are interested on Chagas disease? The probability to encounter a parasite T-Cruci in Uppsala, in Sweden, is almost zero. So the reason is another one. They are not really working on Chagas disease. They are working on the mechanism of the regulation of the expression of the gene in the parasite, which is not exactly the same. Latin American groups, mainly from Argentina, Colombia, Venezuela, etc., participated actively in this collective work. However, their main contribution to Chagas as a social problem was publishing papers with their colleagues from hegemonic countries. And 20 years after the mother promise of the Trypanosoma cruzi genome program, a new controversy of the legitimate way to approach a problem emerged. And then this is why I was talking about the disciplines. There were challenges by genomics as an old promise. The new mother promise arose, and nano research on new drugs and insect controls, thanks to new GPS methods, emerged. So what was new 20 or 30 years ago is submitted to the same kind of process we experimented in the past, and they are also challenged, and we find new disciplinary fields again. So concluding, techno-scientific promises in peripheral contexts tend to hide the peripheral condition of local scientific research. And this is both for scientific dynamics and for politics. They tend to hide the subordinated relations with hegemonic research centers and funding agencies. You know, if you look if you look the cooperation, scientific cooperation policies from most of the developing countries, you will find go and collaborate, be cosmopolite, and try to be friend of everybody. No matter what are you doing within these ties, within these links of scientific cooperation, the important is to be linked, the important is to be in the world. So go away. With some absurd examples. I talked 5 minutes before that we analyzed the Latin American participation in European programs. So Mexico was delayed comparing to Argentina and Brazil. So Mexican government in the 2010 approximately pushed Mexican scientists to participate in international networks and paying a part of the project financed by Europe. So the Mexican people were financing European research. This is a paradox. So the second point they are hiding is the weak capabilities to industrialize locally produced knowledge. If there is a possibility to develop a drug against Chagas or whatever, it will not be industrialized in developing countries. The third point that usually is hidden there is the material means to link present promises to future achievement or some kind of magical thinking. If you remember one of the points aroused by Pierre Benoit Joly, this is an important one, but both in the dynamics of research and in the scientific policies, there is some kind of magical thinking. How are we going to produce drugs? Well, I don't know. We have to produce the knowledge capable to have the drugs. But how to achieve it? I don't know. We'll see. And the fourth, last point, is that the dynamics of research field and the utility of knowledge, it is ignored. The most prestigious the most prestigious is the research field, the most useful is considered the knowledge. No matter how really useful can it be. If you are in the frontier with a new mode of the new modern knowledge, so it will be supported. And I think that's it.